everyone. Welcome. This is episode 353 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James with Ryan and Paul, and I suppose you could call this episode another early postseason postmortem after the Brewers lost to the Mets in Game 3. We're recording this on a Monday night, I think partially because we had some scheduling things, but also kind of wanted to give ourselves another day to let that anger and disappointment fade. I guess we'll see in a minute if that actually worked out. But Paul, how was your Brewerless weekend?
Oh, it was great. It was fantastic. There was a lot of soccer as per usual, but you had a nice, if not confidence-building, Packer victory. And one of the dads at soccer brought these covers that make your beer look like a Pepsi can. So, nothing
Brilliant.
to complain about. Yeah.
Did you win by 20-0 again, or no?
So rec soccer we won, I think 4-1. My team is far too good. The only way we'll ever lose is if 2/3 of the team doesn't show up, which actually might happen at some point. And then travel soccer, I think we also swept the weekend. I think my daughter got her first non-penalty kick goal of travel soccer. So nice to
Awesome.
see. She usually is the keeper, so she doesn't play in the field as much as the other girls, and she had a very nice one-timer off of a nice cross. So well done.
Very nice. Ryan, how was your weekend?
Pretty good. Made a trip to La Crosse, hung out with Amy's folks for her mom's birthday, and just kind of hung out up there and did that stuff. And then Paul and I were on the Larry Mueller show this afternoon. So
yes, we
on
were.
Monday afternoon. So I'll throw out a link to that. I don't believe they've posted the link to it yet of the episode, but I'll throw a link like I did last time out on the socials. So you will be able to see that as well. But that was good. The Packer game was interesting. It was an interesting watch. We were having dinner with Amy's folks at a bar restaurant, and it was a scene, man. It was a scene.
Kind of the same game they've had for a while. A lot of mistakes, but a lot of big plays. And at some point, the luck is not going to be with you. So got to clean things up a bit.
Yeah.
Yep. And we got Arizona next week coming in off a crazy win over San Fran. So
is San Fran just not good, Paul? Is that what we should start to look at here? Is
McCaffrey's hurt?
They're weird. The not protecting leads thing is kind of a Kyle Shanahan special. To the extent he has an Achilles heel, it is I don't even understand why, because they're a good running team typically, but that guy cannot get out of his own way when they're protecting a 10-point lead. He just cannot.
He's Mr. 28-7, right?
Mr. 28-7, yeah. 20 wasn't it 28-3?
28-3. Sorry.
Yeah. So but they're still good. Like Brock Purdy's efficiency numbers are still very good. Their defense, I don't think is quite what it was, but like I feel like every week Fred Warner still has like a pick six off of whoever they're playing, like every single time. So I think that they've basically just got fluky, unlucky. In preparation for the Rams game this week, I went and watched the 49ers lose to the Rams, which happened like 2 weeks ago. And I watched first I looked at the stats, and then I watched it all the way through, and I still have no earthly idea how it happened. The 49ers got out to what I would say is an insurmountable lead. They didn't even play that badly down the stretch, just a couple of little weird mistakes, and they just let them back into it with enough time. It was weird. I still think they're good. I don't think they're bad. But they're a weird team with some weird play calling deficiencies every once in a while.
Yeah, it's definitely early too. But their problems stretch beyond that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
super weird. All right. Before we jump into, I think, frankly, overwhelming number of questions this week you all have after the Brewers' painful playoff exit, I need to remind those of you who aren't patrons yet that you can become one. Go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month guarantees you get your question answered both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible, even if we have like 20 questions this week. $5 level at Patreon gets you that perk plus the additional exclusive content, the minor league extra with Ryan and Spencer, Paul's reporting as eligible mini pods. And we need to mention Ryan and Spencer are recording a new episode on Thursday this week. So Ryan, what are you hoping to talk about?
Yeah, we haven't really discussed it much yet. We got to talk about the Arizona Fall League season is starting tonight. So there's that going on. And we'll basically, I think we're going to wrap the season and kind of talk about some big movers and like what we're sort of expecting, and we'll come up with things to talk about as we always do. So yeah, and we will run part of that next week because we are taking next week off. So from the regular pod. So part of that will be, as we've done in the past sometimes, a little teaser in place of the regular podcast. So there'll be something in your feeds from the tailgate next week, but it will be the minor league extra. It won't be us because we frankly we need the week.
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Wish it could have been this one, but we need to talk about the Mets series. I don't even know where to start. The roller coaster doesn't really do it justice. So many twists and turns, but kind of want to go game by game here because there's only 3 of them to talk about before we get to your guys' questions. So game 1, obviously the Mets were coming off playing a doubleheader in Atlanta the day before and still somehow ended up in a better bullpen situation than the Brewers early on in this series. There was that questioning of whether Pat Murphy should have kept Freddie Peralta in or if he did the right thing in pulling him after 4 innings to avoid the 3rd time through the order penalty. But I think rightly so. A lot of the focus was actually focused on Joel Payamps and Aaron Ashby being unable to do what they're supposed to do and follow through on that, including Payamps not covering first base on a routine play, which kind of opened the door to that nightmare 5th inning. But the Brewers were put in a bad position early on because since this playoff format obviously became a full-time thing in 2022, nobody's ever lost game 1 in a series and come back to win it. And only one other series even went 3 games. So obviously we were feeling pessimistic for a lot of reasons after game 1. But I guess, Paul, let's just start. Did Murphy do the right thing pulling Freddie when he did?
I think so. First of all, it's not like Freddie was out there throwing his best stuff to start. No. And I think they did this also with Myers to great effect. And it's just good sense and good math. And they should be able, the whole point of the team is to count on their bullpen after the starter comes out. Like that is how they're built to operate. The fact that it let them down twice is annoying. But you can't say ex post facto that it was a bad idea because it wasn't all season. It was a good idea all season. And it was, as all Brewer playoff losses are, just weird. Like Payamps not doing that is weird. And just the fact that this didn't work out, that game was so annoying. It was such a stupid game. I hate that game. The rest of the games I also hate. Well, not the win. That was fine. But getting off to this start when you should have had all those advantages and you had a rested bullpen and all you had to do was execute properly, cover your bases. And, they also 4 runs isn't great, but the Brewers win with 4 runs all the time. Like that is usually in the ballpark of getting this done. So the offense could have been better, but it's like average. It did its average thing. They should have won this game, and it's obnoxious that they didn't. And again, just weird garbage cost them.
Yeah, it had very here we go again vibes after that
sure
game.
Did.
And that was all you saw on Twitter. That was all you saw people discussing it. Even me, the eternal
people
optimist.
At the game.
Yeah,
like at the game, it was dead silent after that.
What the killer part of this game was they got up 2. We're like, all right, we're cooking, we're good, and then freaking Jesse Winker hit a triple, and that's again, this is. I know Jesse Winker was hurt when he was playing for us, but in this series, he had a triple and at least 1 stolen base. And what the shit? Sorry, you could just put this stupid thing on this episode.
I didn't feel like it was going to happen anyway, Paul.
It was.
Yeah.
He is one of the slowest people I've ever seen run. And how did that happen? That is ridiculous. And as soon as Jesse Winker hit a triple, I was like, no, not this again. Come on.
Yeah, and then that was the confrontation with Willie and the whole. Willie actually did show up in the parking lot. That was reported by John Heyman. We talked about that with Larry Mueller a little bit today. So yeah, amazing. This was just all of the crap that was. It was like a restatement of the misery that we've been dealing with in these postseason games for a while now. And so it had a very, here we go again feeling, and 100% agree with you on the Freddie Peralta stuff. That was a situation where he had retired 9 straight after giving up 3 runs to open the second inning. And they were not going to leave him in. And I would have physically rushed the field if he had let him in to face Lindor a third time.
Yep.
And yes, there was an extra inning in there. So there were 3 batters that needed to be faced. But part of my thought process was, well, if you have any questions about like the effectiveness of, say, a Joel Payamps, let him face the bottom of the order and, the weakest part of the Mets lineup, and let him come in and do that. That should be fine. And the problem also was, if you didn't do that, what you were going to run into was a situation where you were going to be bringing in Payamps or Ashby or whoever to try to clean up Freddie's mess. If Freddie doesn't get those guys, now you're going to have a mess on your hands. You're going to have runners on for the top of the order.
Yep.
And so I thought it was just better to make the clean break of it, just do it. It didn't work, but that doesn't mean it's bad management. That would be post hoc nonsense. So pulling him in that game was what we had talked about, what everybody who kind of knows what they're talking about was talking about going into this.
Yeah.
It was the smart move, and it just didn't work. So you
also,
lump it and you move on.
So before we move to the next game, so they get the lead back, so they're winning again, 4-3, and then they get to this inning, and again, like I do feel like I don't believe in curses and stuff like that, but we like frickin' Winker did it once, and then this inning starts with after they get Starling Marte, a double from frickin' Tyrone Taylor. Like, That is how this inning gets going too. And then, so Payamps gets out number 2, and then it's walk, single, 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 wild pitch, intentional walk, single walk. Like, there's not a hard hit ball in this whole thing except the double from Taylor. It's just singles and walks and trash. And there's tons of universes where this inning just ends immediately on Jose Iglesias hitting a single to first base, like that, and it's over and harmless. And
right.
So it's just one of those innings, but just terrible that it happened. And the of course the failing to cover is not great. But I hate losing on stupid garbage, and that's what happened in this inning.
I think you guys are right in that this was like the harbinger of doom game, right? Where all of us have seen the Brewers in the playoffs the last however many years in a row in these first round exits, where you're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop the entire game. That's a lousy way to watch a baseball game, but I was like sick to my stomach.
Yep.
And then for them to go 17 straight batters retired after that inning, just without much of a whimper or a hard hit ball at all. Like, ugh. But I mean, both teams kind of had it sucked out of them at the end of that game. But just the quietness at AmFam, I think, was kind of jarring to me. And that sort of kind of carried over a little bit into game 2. Obviously, the Mets had the early gut punch. They scored in the first, but Jackson Chourio, breakout star, at least on the national level, if there's one good thing to take away from this series, tied the game in the bottom of the first. And he, of course, ended up tying the game again later. But again, even after the Brewers tied up the game, everybody's feeling electric with the Chourio home run. They turn around and give up 2 runs right away again in the second inning. Regardless, like they lost the lead immediately. And, the Brewers on the field trying every little thing to get the crowd to make some noise. Like Trevor McGill was waving his arms like a madman almost all series, right? But it wasn't really until that 8th inning that kind of changed everything. They finally got Sean Manaea out of the game. Jackson Chourio, the game tying home run. And then, we had William Contreras almost killing the rally with a double play. And that's the one where that he really didn't look right there. And that'd become a thing the next day. Yeah. But Willie at least came through with the single. And then Garrett Mitchell jumped on the Maytod pinch hit, go ahead home run there to really help solidify, I guess, his legacy. For some weird reason, for a guy who hasn't played all that much, he's quickly becoming considered clutch, I guess, just with all the walk-offs he's had.
Yeah.
But I guess obviously, how are we feeling after game 2? really good. Renewed focus or renewed hope. But through 7 innings there, man, I was despondent. I couldn't, I thought they were getting swept again.
Yeah, see, I wasn't. When they scored, what was it, in the 5th inning, 6th inning? It's kind of in the middle
It
innings
chipped
there.
away. Yeah. It was what, 3-2.
When they chipped it to 3-2, and then the bullpen kept getting the outs and kept coming up with it and getting the outs, and it was like they're putting themselves in a position. We've seen that a lot this year from this team. So I was just sort of waiting for it to happen. I was more hopeful than I sort of expected to be. I was incredibly pessimistic when they took the 2-run lead on Tuesday. I said to Steve and his son, sorry, Lucas, for doing this. Like I said, yeah, well, they've had 2-run leads in each of the last 3 games. I didn't realize that in the last playoff games, I actually said oh yeah, this is nothing because they can give this up in a heartbeat. And then they did. And I felt terrible. So
wow,
yeah, I'm the joy
you're
kill.
Crushing a kid's dreams.
Yeah, so I was the buzzkill on that one, but in this case, I was kind of hopeful, and then obviously when Churio does it, you're just over the moon. But the Garrett Mitchell thing is just jaw dropping because you're like, oh wait, this is actually going to happen now. It felt very curse breaky, and it felt like you were taking and you were getting rid of this bad mojo and you were moving forward. And that was going to feel like a very similar feeling the next night. I was at all 3 of these games, and there's going to be a very similar feeling the next night where it's like, okay, here we go again. And then no. So yeah. I was feeling as good. That was one of the, I was telling people at work the next day, that was one of the top few games I've ever been to in person. Just,
oh yeah,
the drama of it, everything, just the stakes, everything, just an amazing game.
Yeah, definitely a memorable one.
I was waiting for the Churio at bat to come around. I was ready to give that game up, and then when he got up, and I was watching from out at a TV that was inside from outside because I was doing something, and I couldn't tell right away that it was gone when he hit it, and it was great when it was. So, and then you get to the next game, and I feel like if Churio becoming ascendant breaks the curse, then Jake Bauers and Sal Frelick going back to back is establishing there is no longer a curse.
Right. That's what it felt like.
A team of destiny at that point, right? That's, oh my God, the kind of weird stuff you get in a deep playoff run.
Right. It totally felt that way. Well, let's let James set this one up.
Yeah. Okay. So storytelling, game 3, Tobias Myers, old nemesis, Jose Quintana, pitching duel through the first, 5 or 6 innings. And then, scoreless actually into the 7th, right? And it was, what was it, the 2nd or 3rd game ever, winner go home game that was scoreless in the 7th inning? What, I don't know. Sarah Langs had a tweet. It was amazing. It was weird and historical. Again, adding to the feeling that, okay, we're on the verge of something special here, right? Still scoreless through the top of the 7th, right? And then, as you mentioned, Jake Bauers and Sal Frelick, alone would be, 2 of the most unlikeliest home runs in Brewers playoff history. But going back to back on back to back pitches, Ryan, is just absurd. The Brewers had to win at that point.
And we were joking all year about the fact that Jake Bauers is exactly the kind of random person who's going to hit a home run. And you have been saying for weeks, you and JR both have been saying Sal Frelick's going to hit a postseason home run because that's just the way that this stupid stuff works.
He was going to be this year's David Eckstein. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to have that actually happen, and the Frelick one was such a jaw dropper because it was just such a Titanic
the piss out of that.
Well, and
it was Paul, where the hell's that been all year?
No kidding.
Paul set you up again for it. This was the hardest hit ball that he had all year, right?
Yes, it was the hardest hit ball he's had all year. As everybody who listens to this knows by now, Sal Frelick was in the 1% of MLB exit velocity statistics on the season. He averaged 83 miles per hour exit velocity. This was the hardest ball he hit all year. Saved it for the playoffs. So good on Sal for that. And after getting hurt and barely making the roster.
How do you have the lower body strength to hit a home run like that when you have a bruised hip? Yeah, it was. He made it look like a Prince Fielder home run.
Yep.
This is Sal Frelick.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Now, I will say I did end this inning with just a little bit of a hair of lingering doubt because
Okay.
they almost got more.
Oh, yeah.
They had second and third with 2 outs, and William Contreras, who did not look right, up, and he struck out and stranded Terang and Perkins. And I spent a lot of time just being like, I wish we would have gotten at least one of those home, but still feeling good.
Yeah. William Contreras wearing like the Stone Cold Steve Austin style knee braces popping out of his pants
Yep.
For that game. That was also not a great feeling. But everything was following the script for the Brewers again. Devin Williams up in the 9th inning, 2-0 lead, has been fantastic in this series, and or at least to end the year, and everything leading up to this. Francisco Lindor leadoff walk, and I think if I had a tinge, that's when it started for me.
Yep.
I was like, oh no, it's one of those Devin innings. But he got Vientos to strike out, but then Brandon Nimmo, another single, of course, for the Mets, put him at first and third, and then fluttered the airbender to Pete Alonso. Just location not where he wanted it, pretty much all inning on that pitch. And he said as much after the game that he feels like he let everyone on the team down. He at least sat there and took all the questions like you would want somebody to do that. But Paul, I know you were kind of first and a half guessing this as it was happening, and I don't know if I agree with you, but do you want to go through why you thought that way?
So upon reviewing this, I decided I would not have taken him out because 2 walks and I would have taken him out. Had he walked 2 people, that would have been my Devin Williams limit, but he did not walk 2 people. He got Mark Vientos, and he gave up a single to Brandon Nimmo, and that single was annoying because he was up 0-2 on him, and I think that's all of the things that got me annoyed at Devin. I still would have let him pitch to Alonso, and I still would have let this happen, but Lindor had an 8-pitch at bat. And seemingly just wasn't missing the ball. And that's, I think what got to me is like, he's not missing bats. He's having trouble missing bats here. And so he got Mark Vientos. I have to confess, I forgot Mark Vientos existed till the series started, even though we just played the Mets the series before. And so that doesn't do a ton for me. And Brandon Nimmo is an annoying hitter. He's not great, but he's pretty good. And that he couldn't put him away. At that point, I was like, he couldn't get Lindor, and he couldn't get Nimmo up 0-2. I do not like this. And at that point, I was like that. And my main thing is like, before we get to, well, obviously Alonso hit home run. We already said that, but I would have, in this situation, if I was managing, I would always have people up in the pen in the 9th inning here because this is it. This is the most important thing that you're ever going to do. You need to be able to pull him spontaneously if you need to. And like I said, I still think I would have let him face Alonso for the platoon reason. I definitely would not have allowed him to face any of the next hitters, though. I would have had Williams out of there for Iglesias and Winker and Marte. And while it didn't end up mattering that they scored another run, like, what the hell were you doing letting them score another run? Thank God
that was Jesse Winker spiking the helmet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, Murphy, you have to get him out at that point. They could have been down 1, and it probably doesn't matter because they didn't score any runs, but maybe they approached the inning a little bit differently. Like, maybe Joey bunts Frelick over to second in the bottom of the 9th. I don't know if that happens, but maybe. And so I was wishy-washy and iffy right away on him not being able to miss bats. And Murphy screwed up by not taking him up after he gave up the lead.
So, yeah, I'm glad that you've gone that direction with it. I'm going to go back and make a point about something that was going around immediately after the game a lot that I didn't actually get around to looking at until Friday afternoon to actually really take a good look at it. But that was this idea that Devin Williams was bad on back-to-backs. That was a number that was running around, and immediately this has got to be small sample size stuff because he just didn't pitch that many games, period. and I was correct when I looked it up. If you looked at it, coming into the day, he had pitched 5 times on back-to-backs, and on those second days, he had 3 1-2-3 innings with Ks, 2 Ks, and one of them was a 1K game. He had another game where he did get into trouble with a couple walks and a hit by pitch, but ended up wiggling out of it and didn't give up any runs. That was a game on August 31st. The game that everybody remembers was the game against the Cardinals on August 21st, and that was when he walked 3 people, hit a batter, gave up a hit, 2 earned runs. That was the true meltdown game of the run. And so from that perspective, like, I don't think that he's bad on back-to-backs, and Pat Murphy should have seen that narrative that was going around. I just don't think we had anything close to the number, the samples that we would have needed to be able to say that was accurate. I just don't think that we can. Yeah,
I disagree a little bit on that because essentially Devin Williams pitched 22 times, and he was basically when he wasn't on a back-to-back, he was basically in trouble once. That was on August 7th against Atlanta when he had just come off the DL a few games before. So he was basically in trouble 1 out of 17 and then 2 out of 5. And so, yeah, it's a small sample, but basically he only gets in trouble when he has pitched on back-to-back days. So I still would have let that affect my decision-making at least a bit and been a little bit more closely guarded with him.
Yeah, what I would say is that I think that you can make the case that, and you did, that he should have had somebody up warming before he did. I don't think, as you also said this, that he shouldn't have pulled him for Pete Alonso. There's no pulling him for Pete Alonso.
Point, there's no reason.
If it would have been opposite side, then maybe yes, but it wasn't. So yeah.
Right, and that is the thing. And there was something, we talked about this with Larry today, that he didn't have a lefty up warming. And granted, the hitters that were due were right-handed, but there was a very good chance because it was Iglesias and Martinez and Marte were the ones who were due, but Jesse Winker was looming, and potentially as a guy that you would, say if there's 2 outs, you might go to Koenig there to get that lefty matchup and do something like that. I could see an argument for that. I don't think it's a lockdown situation. I think that this is still within the margin of error for like what you would reasonably expect. And I think managers sticking with guys, and this was something that Ben Lindbergh brought up on Effectively Wild on the episode following this disaster, was that Devin Williams is one of the greatest relief pitchers in the history of the game of baseball. Emmanuel Clase, who, those of you who know, gave up a 3-run homer of his own in the 9th inning today to lose a game against the Tigers. Clase is the greatest of all time with 200 innings pitched. He has a 40 ERA minus, and this is a Fangraph stat. And the way it works is a park adjust, especially ERA plus on Baseball Reference, but it just works a little bit different, and it takes it as below 100 is good, as opposed to, because ERA is a number, the lower the better, so they do that. Anyway, Clase is the best with 200 innings all time at 40. Devin Williams is second at a 44, and Mariano Rivera is third with a 49. So Devin Williams has been unbelievably good in his career and is one of the best relief pitchers on a inning-to-inning basis. And yes, the things you could say about this year, well, there was the weirdness of the injury, and those things sort of throw all of this into flux a little bit, but I don't see... This is what you wanted. You wanted Devin Williams into the game.
Exactly.
To shut it down. This is what you try to set up. The Freddie Peralta thing, we didn't even talk about that here. Freddie Peralta pitching the 8th inning.
That was weird.
In the 8th inning.
I thought things were going to go bad. Paul, you said today that you thought things were going to, like, that's where our nerves were. And then when he got through it.
Yeah. We were like, oh, God, he's going to give it up on the apology inning. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and there was some post talk that came up too of people saying, well, why didn't he leave Freddie in to finish the game? And just no. Stop. No. Devin Williams is...
It already worked out. You're good.
Yeah. Yes. You got away with that Freddie Peralta inning. And we've all seen Freddie Peralta go to pieces very quickly at very random times. And so, no, Devin Williams is He had pitched once since Saturday. That was the night before, but he either pitched a 10 or 12 pitches. So he was not like he pitched a lot the night before. He didn't have one of his games where he went deep. He had a 1-2-3 quick inning. This is what you want. This is what you're setting it up for. This is what you set up. And it didn't work. And that sucks. But yeah, this wasn't a tactical problem. This was just sometimes you get beat. Devin Williams got beat. And that's what he said too, was, he just got beat.
He didn't execute. Yep. It's doubly painful for me too, because this isn't Josh Hader, right? Like, we're not programmed to expect home runs with Devin Williams. He gave up 1 all year, granted in 22 games this year, but 4 all of last year in 61 games. Like, we've talked about this, when Devin gets beat, it's typically the walks and then the singles and doubles, but he keeps the ball in the park for the most part. The fact that this was an opposite field home run that barely got into the picnic area, which the Brewers should ban the picnic area, that just makes it even more like unbelievable. Like, that gut punch doesn't do it justice to me, but we've got questions about that. But first of all, something that we did get on Patreon. So our first Patreon question this week is going to come from Morgoth 10, who's asking, how about that pitch tipping theory from John Boy about Devin? Thoughts? So if you didn't see this online, John Boy, I think on his Twitter, in his YouTube, came up with this theory that Devin Williams was tipping pitches in the 9th inning in Game 3, and he thinks he picked up something where the distance Devin holds the glove from his body depends on whether he's gripping for a fastball or a changeup, because when you grip his changeup, he's got to reach his entire hand in the glove, so therefore the gap is whatever. That was the theory. Apparently Trevor Plouffe signed off on this too, but I'm not totally convinced that this was the issue. Paul, what do you think?
I think he actually might have been, but I'm not sure I agree with that being the way he was doing it. And only because I thought the airbender looked like a bit of a mechanical mess. And he was finishing it especially weird. And so this is all after he threw it, so it's not tipping. But let me explain. When he was throwing his fastball, his trail leg would come around, and it would be like very, very like rehearsed, mechanical, same motion every time. When he threw the airbender and his trail leg came around, it was like kicked out really wide, and it would like kind of lazily come forward. And I think to get those end results requires such different mechanics that hitters probably notice the difference. Like, those pitches tunnel really well, but I think the way he threw them was different enough that you could kind of tell which one was coming. And to some extent, I think John Boy was like kind of looks at the glove stuff and has done that kind of thing in the past with pitchers. But I think it's just more that the deliveries were very different. And so I do think he was tipping a little bit. And I think with the airbender in particular, having trouble locating it, he was trying to aim it too much and not throw it enough.
Yeah, so this is totally not my area of expertise. Pitching mechanics is a subject left far better for Spencer. I'll ask him about it if they don't do a wrap up. I'm generally skeptical of pitch tipping. We kind of talked about this a little bit with Montas last week, that there was this talk of him tipping pitches. And one of the biggest reasons I'm skeptical of it is, one, I think it happens a lot more than people realize. And I think that in a lot of cases, when the pitcher's stuff is really good, it just doesn't matter as much because the pitch is still really hard to hit, even if you know it's coming. There's, Sandy Koufax famously tipped his pitches his entire career, and he was, had that run of 5 years where he's like the best pitcher, one of the best pitchers of baseball history. And it didn't matter because the quality of the pitches were so good. You could tell the batters what was coming and they still couldn't hit it. So it didn't really matter. So I tend to be pretty skeptical of that. There might be something here, but I'm going to need to hear from somebody who is like a pitching coach. Like we have a pitching coach, in residence here. We need to talk to the pitching coach and see what he thinks about this.
I do think with Williams that it would have a bigger effect than normal. If you have a fastball slider guy who can locate both of those for strikes, and is good at missing bats in and out of the zone, it matters less. But if you just decide not to swing at the airbender, that is often going to work for you because he doesn't throw a ton of them for strikes. Now, of course, Alonso crushed one, so he actually did swing at it. But if you just go in, if you could tell it's coming in advance and don't take a hack at it at all, you have a really good chance of walking against Williams.
All right, let's move on to the general Patreon questions about how we're just dealing with this loss. Jay Google first up asking, where does this playoff loss rank? Don't think I've seen this many people this hurt by how it ended, especially guys like Uke and Levering. And yeah, if you heard the radio call, it was very, very depressing. Christian Yelich and a couple of other guys mentioned that Uke made the rounds and talked one-on-one with all the guys in the locker room too, and everybody seemed to be crying after that conversation. So that leads to more questions from me that we can maybe get into. But I guess, Ryan, in the pantheon of Brewers losses, I mean, Game 7 NLCS in 2018 stinks. What else for you? Where does this rank?
They were winning in the World Series Game 7, bottom of the 6th inning.
That's probably fair.
That's where I'm going to end up with this. I went and looked all this up before we went on with Larry today, and yeah, the Game 7 of the 2018 NLCS was kind of anticlimactic because they were behind after like the second inning in that game. They never had a lead.
Whole game.
So it was just, and they ended up losing 5-1. The Puig home run ended up ending it, the 3-run homer. So that wasn't like this. There wasn't anything like this in that. Game 6 of the NLCS in 2011, obviously it was a beatdown. That was the Sean Markham game. He got killed, and it just, yeah. So there was that. Obviously, then you really have to go back. You could say kind of the wild card game because
I was going to say the wild card game too.
Yeah, like that's the closest thing we have to it from our generation. But like going back, and Paul, are you old enough to remember the 82 series?
A little bit. I was 5, so
okay.
I remember like 5-year-olds remember things.
Right.
Not a lot of details, but I remember everybody being pretty crushed that they lost.
And yeah, as you brought up, they were leading 3-1 in the 6th inning, and they gave up 5 runs and ended up losing 6-3. That's not quite time, like time of the game wise. That's not the 9th inning. You're literally 2 outs away. I was sitting there counting outs because I'm an idiot. You're so close to it at that point. This is well before that point where you would be doing that, but the stakes of it are obviously winning a best of 3 wild card round is not the same thing as winning the World Series. So the stakes of it, yeah, I think you could say that one is probably the more crushing loss because, just how close they got to the ultimate goal. But yeah, this is right up there because this was truly last second. I went and looked at the win probabilities, and you don't even want to know before that inning what they were.
No.
Like it was
a bad wee.
Yeah, like, yes, it was a horrible week. I love Sarah Langs, but heart of a murderer for that one. Heart of a murderer.
Yeah, I guess along that note, Adam Post asking, how long will this loss cause me to hate baseball? And man, just me personally, I have not been able to watch any of the LDS games because I'm just not ready to watch more baseball. And then to see the Mets in the box score beat the Phillies in the first game too. Oh man. But Paul, how long does it take you to get over something like this?
Not very long, but I'm not watching more baseball because that will bring it back to the 4. So I recover in 24 hours. And I think my biggest comp for this game is actually the 2014 NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
That's how close they were. And if they do any of 21 things different, they win that game, and they should have won that game and gone to the Super Bowl, but they didn't. And so yeah, that game is the same for me. The same level of defeat. So it might take a bit for most people. I'm good at this point, but that sucked.
Yeah, that's a very good comp because it was so late, and the certainty of victory was relatively very, very high in both cases. Yeah. That's a good comp for it. I've been watching baseball since Saturday, so I guess I just
you're a sicko.
Yeah, I'm just a sicko.
There's no reason for that.
I just jumped right back on. So yeah, I am rooting. Usually I kind of root for the team that knocked us out to advance because it's like, oh, hey, or at least we got beaten by the best. You know, you could do the Simpsons, we got beaten by the best boy. But in this case, this one I'm not, because if the Mets go on and like win the World Series, we will never, ever, ever stop seeing that home run. That home run,
Pete Alonso home run,
will be in every montage. We will just be confronted with it. Whereas, you know, if the Mets bow out here, it's sort of just, you know, the Mets fans will always remember that, and it will be a big deal to them.
Yeah,
like it will be big to them, but it won't have the same place in baseball history that it will if they go on and like actually win it all. So screw that. Get the Mets out as quickly as possible, please. Please and thank you.
What it might have done is gotten Pete Alonso a big new contract to stay with the Mets, because pending free agent, and now Steve Cohen. Just throw $200 million at him. He's a postseason hero. Polar bear. We love that guy.
Can I tell you? I looked at my friend who was sitting next to me at the game when he let that ball drop in the 8th inning. Was it the 8th inning? In the 7th inning, when Pete Alonso, when he failed to catch that ball, I looked at my friend and I went, "Hey, so Pete Alonso's a free agent. That might be the last thing he does as a New York Met is drop that ball." To screw them over, because at that point we didn't even know that, like, I think there were 2 runners on. I think that was the situation we were talking about, Paul, with the 2 runners on. And like, had they then come through and blown the game open and, you know, been up 4-0 at that point, then that would have been this historically bad moment for Pete Alonso, as opposed to him getting this opportunity to win the game. So yeah, it's funny how baseball will always smack you in the face like that.
Tis.
All right, I'm going to jump down to Tim Brown's question, who's asking this week, why should we believe this will ever be different? It's always a little different, but it always ends up the same with failure. Average 92 wins a year for 6 years and flop in September or the first round. So, I mean, Paul, I think that's part of like the negative feeling after game 1 and for most of game 2, right? It's like, here we go again. And this is just what we have to expect.
Kinda. And I just can't help wondering, like, if Yelich would have just made it through the season, they probably don't have this. They probably win. They probably win this series. They're probably still playing. And it is, there's obviously a lot of luck that goes into this, but with how bad they've been, it's not just luck. It's like a 1 in 10,000 chance to have this happen to you. Like it's not. There's definitely something to the way that they go about doing stuff that makes them more likely to lose in playoff baseball. There is luck for sure too, but there is some flaw that they have. They need to get another bat or two. They need, honestly, like Tobias was good, but it might be nice to have a starting pitcher who can actually go like 6 in a playoff game every once in a while and not have like a 30% chance of exploding. That's maybe something worth pursuing too. So I think they need you need to have the pitching that they do, and you need a better offense than this. And I know they scored a bunch of runs this year, but their offense was still very flawed. And if they don't fix that, they're still going to be vulnerable when they get to the big teams.
The thing is, about that second point about the starting pitcher, though, they had that. They had Burns and Woodruff at the top of this rotation, I guess, in 2020 and 2021. They were supposed to in 2023, and then that fell apart. So, like, they had those stud horse guys that are supposed to carry you, and they didn't. Like, they just didn't. They didn't do that in those times. The batting thing, yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because they have to develop this up from within for the most part, or find a guy who is like a low cost. JR was talking about this on the Microbrew podcast. Like, when they went out and got Rhys Hoskins, we thought that was actually the move, right? We thought that's what they were doing. And then it turned out that Rhys Hoskins wasn't that, or at least he wasn't that this year. We're probably going to get a chance again. Rhys Hoskins has the option to come back for $18 million next year. Rhys Hoskins is coming back next year. So maybe he can do this in year 2. Maybe he'll go Jesse Winker on us, in that way, and we'll actually get to take the benefit of it this time.
Yeah, but even with Rhys, just assume for a second that Rhys was good. I think my future like line in the sand is going to be, did Isaac Collins make the postseason roster? And if he did, then I'm not. Then I'm going to expect them to lose again. You can't have that. That guy can't be on the postseason roster. You need actual major league people to be on the postseason roster.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a weird one though, because that was
Why?
well, it
Most
wouldn't
teams don't have that.
well, he took Christian Yelich's spot fundamentally, and
Okay, but that's one injury. Everybody has one injury.
they were also just this year. They had on the hitting depth side, they had a lot go right for them with on the pitching side. We've talked about that endlessly. A lot of the things they did worked right. Things were a little thin on the hitting side thing, like some of the moves that they made to bring guys in, like Brewer Hicklin came up and was terrible. Oliver Dunn, they gave him some time at the beginning of the season, and that didn't work. They were trying some different things to sort of build up depth that was going to be better.
Yes, they were trying
than Isaac
bad
Collins.
players. They need to stop doing that.
Well,
You can try some bad players, but you need more good players so that there's not that guy at the end.
good players cost money, and
Yes,
a lot of money.
Spend that.
But
do that.
But oftentimes they end up being bad players in the end. You spend the money on a good player, and they end up being a bad player for you anyway. I mean that is kind of the Rhys Hoskins story to this point. Is like that is kind of how this works. Often, like free agency in baseball, you are buying guys past their primes because almost nobody.
So Rhys Hoskins blows. Okay, he sucks. He didn't do anything in this, but he had a 98 OPS plus, and Andrew Monasterio had a 62, and Oliver Dunn had a 66.
Yeah.
And Tyler Black had a 59, and Owen Miller had a 13, and Isaac Collins had a -5.
Yeah.
So
And
even that terrible signing for that guy who did jack shit was infinitely better than all of those other guys who I just mentioned. The guy with -5 having made the playoff roster.
yeah, my point was going back to the original thing was that usually somebody that they pick up like this ends up hitting and ends up being a better player than what Isaac Collins did. That part of it didn't work this year. They didn't get that the player to break out in the way that, like, I don't know, like Jace Peterson or Eric Sogard or they didn't have that happen this year where they had from this assortment of crap and they had a guy break through. They didn't get that this year. So like the Isaac Collins thing, and he wouldn't have been on the roster had this been a 5-game series instead. They would have had Colin Ray on instead. So like it was pretty circumstantial that he was on the roster in the first place. Like I don't know how much that actually matters.
All right. Going to take the next couple together because they kind of share the same theme and follows this line of conversation too. Patrick Demper asking, was this outcome the most predictable thing that could have happened, or am I just a pessimistic fatalist? And then we have Keith Keskinen writing, hello, boys. My first episodic memory from sports was the 1999 NFC wildcard game against the San Francisco 49ers.
Classic.
I remember listening to the end of the game in the car with my family. While I have since watched both Packers 90 Super Bowls, I do not remember experiencing them live. Since that wild card loss to San Francisco, in parentheses, Rice fumbled, I have witnessed 4 more NFC wildcard losses, 7 NFC divisional round losses, 4 NFC conference championship losses, 4 NL wildcard losses, including this year again, 2 NLDS losses, 2 NLCS losses, 11 Eastern Conference first round losses for the Bucks, 2 Eastern Conference semifinals losses, 2 Eastern Conference finals losses, 4 Big Ten conference championship losses, 4 Rose Bowl losses, 12 NCAA tournament first weekend losses, 6 NCAA tournament Sweet 16 losses, 1 Elite 8 loss, 2 Final Four losses, and 1 tournament national championship loss in a pear tree. I added the last part. My question is, while we have reached the mountaintop twice since 1999 with the Packers Super Bowl and the Bucks title, what in the fuck did we do to deserve the rest of this? I know Ryan is of the belief that it's better to be relevant and lose in the playoffs, but with this much heartbreak, how bad can being bad really be? Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good cataloging of how relevant and good these teams have been for this whole time.
It's
And like,
generous. Yeah.
well, no, I mean, they've been good and relevant and have been in a lot
Yeah.
of good positions to like do things where your hopes were legitimately up for real
Yeah.
reasons. And then
It's
they
crazy
get
that the
dashed.
Badgers have 2 Final Fours in my lifetime, honestly. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Oh yeah, tell me that in 1994 when the Badgers were making the NCAA tournament for the first time since literally 1946 or whatever it was. I'm a little bit older. I'm old enough to remember the 80s, and so I remember when all my teams were shitty and like everything was bad. And I remember I grew up a Badger football fan first. That was the very first thing I fell in love with. And even by the age of like 12 or 13, I was resigning myself to the fact they were always going to be shit. They were never going to be good. And then 1993 happened. And sort of the same thing. The Packers, I grew up with shitty Packer teams my entire childhood.
Big time.
Again, until the 92 season? Was that the Favre year? It was 92, 93?
92 is when it kind of broke, yeah. 91, you had a taste.
I was a huge Bucks fan in the 90s and just wanting nothing more than like those Glenn Robinson, Ray Allen teams to succeed. And they finally did. And that got to a heartbreaking point on its own. And like, the point is that I think there's a generational thing here where you haven't seen, like, because this last line here about how bad can being bad really be? And I'm here to tell you it really sucks. It really, really sucks a lot. As somebody who grew up in it and like lived with it in that way, it really, really sucks. You don't want that. If you're an avid sports fan and you want to watch sports and care about what happens in those sporting events, you don't want that. It is horrible. It is. This at least gives you a reason to care and gives you a reason to be excited and to invest yourself in it. And you do not want that. You just do not want that.
All right. Beater Pete. Well, guess I'm coming home from Italy. This has been a bitter and tough end to the season. I enjoyed the season a lot. How would you compare this team's energy and grit compared to the past few playoff experiences? At least this defeat wasn't within 24 hours, which I guess fair point.
Yeah.
And Paul, I think maybe that's why this hurts so much, at least for me, is like for once they showed they were resilient and they still lost. Like,
yeah.
Come on.
It's also annoying because they rallied back and they got that win, and they had a bunch of chances to actually get it done by just playing normal baseball, just like defend your position properly, and you probably win. And stuff like that. And so it's very frustrating. I too am used to they lost immediately and now the season is over. But they could have done this one. Like, it was there for them, and they just didn't do it.
Yeah, they got really, really close, and it basically came down to one guy not executing and not getting the job done. And that's baseball, and it sucks. Like, that just, like, what else are you going to say? This sucks to continually go through this. But, yeah, there was a different vibe to this team. You can't have lived through that game on Wednesday night without acknowledging there was a different vibe to this team.
Yeah.
But they just didn't get it done. And that sucks.
Yeah, and I think kind of one of the cruel ironies of this is, I forget if it was Devin Williams or Christian Yelich who said, like, game 3, they finally played like their typical clean game, and that's the one that they just couldn't finish in the end. And that just, oh man, blows my mind.
Yep.
All right, Lucroy Suitcase asking, what are your theories for why the winner of the first game has won every single one of these wild card series so far? I think we need to have the caveat of the full-time wild card round, right? So since 2022, I know the 2020 stats started sneaking in there, and I'm here to say those don't count because 2020 doesn't count. So since this became a full-time thing, yes, this was only the second game 3 played in this round's format, and the team that's won game 1 has still won every single series. I know, Paul, it's random chance and small sample size in a 3-game series, but also we've got like 24 or something of these series now to
Yeah.
look at.
Oh, it's harder when you're down one, and you play tighter if you know that you might be eliminated. Also, there's some selection bias in that. Baseball is fairly random, but the better team is going to win game one a lot of the time. So that makes sweeps and general things more likely. But I just do think it's demoralizing to get down a game in a 3-game series. The 3-game series is stupid. One of the good things about a 7-game series is that you're not dead if you lose the first game. Like, you can come back. People come back from that all the time.
Mhm.
Whereas this puts you directly under the gun immediately. And it's a big emotional toll on the team that gets down. And, it's hard to play like flawlessly after that. It just becomes very difficult. So there's a lot working against that team. And I not a big fan of it. We all ripped it already before it actually happened, but it's a stupid way to play baseball. They should stop doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest answer, everything you said is totally true. And I think that does impact why so many of these have not ended up going 3 games, that the team just gets swept out. Because I think ours was only the second time that one of these games or one of these series had gone to a 3rd game. So of the 12 series, 10 were sweeps. And then 2 of them went to the 3rd game, but then the team that won game 1. That's more of a fluke. That I think you will see those things kind of even out over time. But just the simple fact is that math says that once you're 1 game away from losing, you and the other team can lose twice as many games before they're eliminated. Math says that you have a huge advantage at that point. So just the simple fact of it is, once the team wins game 1, they have a huge mathematical advantage to advance in the series, and somebody's going to win game 1. So whoever that team is going to then have a huge mathematical advantage. Maybe not this big. This is probably flukishly high. But some of those soft factors Paul was talking about definitely come into play, I'm sure. Where it feels like the team is going to start playing like, well, we have no tomorrow. And so it's going to be tough for them to do that.
Next up, we have a pair of questions I'm going to ask together because they both kind of deal with where do we go from here? How do the Brewers build this team going forward? So first we have Luke Zimmerman, who's asking, now that we've seen another playoff loss as the number 3 division winner, is there any sort of reorienting the franchise to set being one of the top 2 division winner positions as the goal? Does this need to become a chief objective when considering moves at the trade deadline when the team's competitive? Or is the situation just that the economics of Major League Baseball leads the team to be more or less content with winning the division and ending up as the number 3 seed while hoping to somehow make it through the wild card round at some point? And then Ted Johnson asking, why does God hate us? But really, is there an inherent flaw in building a team based on depth to win the war of attrition of the regular season? But when the playoffs come around, there isn't enough star power to advance. I group these 2 together because I feel like B plays into A, or at least a little bit, judges or helps the front office judge how they want to proceed, Paul.
Yeah. So I do think that their depth strategy does hurt them in the playoffs. I do think teams that have more star power up front get to lean on it more heavily, and stars are just like Shohei Ohtani is better at hitting good pitching than anybody else is at hitting good pitching, and William Contreras and Willie Adames are not as good at hitting good pitching when they run into it, or Quintana apparently. And so like that does matter. It absolutely does. Like the Brewers' depth serves them well during the regular season. They can grind out games against other teams when they're resting players, when they're playing the long game. The back end of the Brewer bullpen is able to dominate the sort of rank and file baseball players that they see, but the playoffs are a different animal, and the Brewers' depth doesn't go as far, especially in a 3-game series. It would be better in a 7-game series. It actually would bring that advantage back into play, but they never get there because it doesn't work as well there. And first of all, they could have they were so close to getting the bye. Like they only finished 2 games behind the Phillies, and they could have won a couple of the games. They played against the Phillies very easily and stolen that. So they're in the ballpark there. They just needed to have a few things break their way. But they could use a little more oomph on offense. Like they really, really could. And they, if they had Yelich, they maybe would have that. Like that lineup looks a lot better if he's there. Even 85% Yelich, who is Marlins or not whatever. Not MVP Yelich, just normal good hitter Yelich. That is, I think, good enough to have them in the top conversation, but it's just too holy. So they need to fix that if they actually want to get through. They really do.
Yeah, I mean, they did in 2018 lead the National League in wins. Granted, it was only 96 wins, and they had to play that one gamer against the Cubs, the wonderful, magical game 163. They had to do that, but they did, and it ended up working out. So they can do this. They in 2021 would have also been, I believe, the number 2 seed, but this was the year before that system went into place. So like we have recent examples of teams that could have gotten the bye. It just didn't exist at that point. So anyways, there's that. The thing about the depth thing, I've been thinking about this a lot because you mentioned this on the Larry show today, and I've been thinking about this a lot. And the problem isn't the depth. You need the depth to get through the regular season, regardless. The Dodgers have shown this.
It's not a problem. It's just their thing they're really good at.
Right. The depth part of it is something they need to do regardless. And so having depth and building through depth as opposed to building a stars and scrubs roster, which like kind of until this year San Diego was doing, like San Diego was really doing that quite a bit. And it screwed them over in that they didn't make the playoffs a bunch of times because they didn't have guys behind their stars to contribute. So they need to do the depth thing regardless. And frankly, that's not a problem because it isn't like super expensive to do. I mean, obviously there's some cost involved. You have to make trades at certain times. You have to do certain things to achieve that depth. You spend some money around the margins and spread some money around instead of concentrating into one player. But the depth part of it is not the hard part to do. The hard part is the stars part. And that gets into all of the old questions about baseball and its economics and how you want to go about things. Frankly, the most reliable way for the Brewers to get star players is to develop them themselves. And they have turned into a pretty damn good player development machine at this point. So that is on the upswing, but it's still not as good as, like, they're not as good at this as the Rays or the Dodgers or somebody like that. They need to get a little bit better at it, but that's the number one most reliable way. Or the other way that they can get star players somewhat reliably is to trade for them before they become stars, right? To acquire them before they become stars, to see in them things they can do to make them better and to bring that out in them. That's usually going to be a trade. Sometimes might be a free agent, but that's really tricky to do. Like, because there's so many smart teams in baseball that are looking for all the same things you are for potential breakout players that's going to be really hard to do anyway. So yeah. So then the question becomes, do you buy them? And buying stars is a thing that, like, in this market just isn't really feasible. Like, buying at market price stars on the free agent market is just like, the closest we get to that is what, Lorenzo Cain?
Yeah,
like,
probably.
Like that's sort of, I mean, in our time as as adult fans of this team, the closest we get to that is like buying a star level player who gives you star level performance at a market rate deal. And I want to remind you that the reason that we got Lorenzo Cain was, one, he was partially willing to sign here because he had been here and I think he liked it. So there was a familiarity aspect where it wasn't just like some random thing. And also, the market crashed that winter, and the Brewers were able to swoop in very late. That deal got done in the very end of January. He was looking for more money and was trying to get more money elsewhere and had to end up settling for Milwaukee at that point. The next year, the Brewers went and brought in Grandal, who had a star level season, but they got him for 1 year. Moustakas, kind of the same deal. Not quite a star. He was as good as Grandal, but sort of the same level deal. So it really does get into like trying to buy stars is really damn hard in this market. To buy bona fide actual star baseball players at market rate in this market, I don't think that can ever be a core strategy.
At least, this winter we'll have like a third of baseball without any television deal. So that'll help drive prices down for the Brewers.
And the Brewers are one of those teams. So
yeah,
we'll have to get into that when we come back. But yeah, that's because we still don't exactly know what's going on with that, because they keep like even Drellick, who's usually nails at this stuff, put out information and then had to kind of say to clarify, and is now on like several clarifying tweets about the thing, about what's going on. So we don't really know what's going on with that, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I did look, Paul, you saw it because you brought up Alex Bregman, and I did kind of look through where the Brewers were payroll wise and whatever. Like I think you could do something like 5 years and 130 million for him. If you knew you were going to be carrying a payroll, well over 150 million for the next few years, but I think he's going to sign for more than that.
That's way low.
It's probably way low. And I also think he would probably take money from somebody else. If that was the deal that gets him, he would probably take it from somebody other than the Brewers. So
like the Astros. All right.
Yeah.
Morgoth 10 has a few questions here. Let's start with the first couple. Which is worse, the crushing loss of the entire offseason of negative punditry that we can expect from a certain subset of Brewers fans? I'd honestly argue the latter. Already seen plenty that makes me almost sadder than actually losing the game. And then another one from Morgoth asking, did I miss an undercurrent of folks that seemingly thought the Undaunted slogan was stupid? I don't know if I saw that. I know there were people having fun with it, but Paul, thoughts on either one of those?
It is stupid, and it was a bad slogan. I feel like Pat Murphy came up with it himself, and that's, you don't want your old trusty manager doing that. That was dumb. I didn't see a lot of negative punditry. I mean, I saw a lot of correct punditry and like sadness over Bob Uecker probably not being in good shape. But like, I don't know. They lost a game and they like didn't cover first base and they blew a crucial. Like the punditry is just accurate here. So the game is definitely worse than the punditry. The punditry has been fine, even accurate.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what the offseason brings. I sort of feel like every year we do a memory wash on everything we learned from the last year's winter about how we should proceed with our expectations in the winter of like what is a realistic timeline look like for us to see actual moves, and when is stuff going to happen and all that stuff. And I feel like every year we collectively, myself included, forget those things and need to like constantly be reminded that like if this team is going to do something meaningful, it's probably going to happen after Christmas and
February.
So, like more likely February than December. I guess the William Contreras trade was in December, right? So like we got that move in December, and I heard somebody say like basically I want more of that. I want more of the William Contreras trade. It's like, well, but that's incredibly hard to pull off because from the moment that trade was made, it was insane. And the only reason it happened was because Fisher out in San Francisco out in Oakland was making his guys trade away good players and some sort of cockamamie scheme. I don't even know exactly what it was. They were going full major league over there. So basically, we needed that to happen for that circumstance to pull off a heist trade where from the moment you make the trade, everybody agrees, oh my God, how did you do that?
Yeah.
That's the exception, man. That's not the rule. You just can't you can't force that to happen. Like that gets into like, how are you going to make that trade? Are you going to, pull a gun, or are you going to put your finger in your pocket and pretend it's a gun? Like what is your plan here for getting that trade made? Because usually when fans start speculating about that stuff, it's bad. So we'll see. It's probably going to be a very similar winter to what we've experienced lately. And so I expect all the same angst and anxiety and griping and complaining and all. I expect to see it all again because I don't think it's going to change this winter.
Just keep calling the A's. If they're going to play in a AAA ballpark, they're not going to want any major league players. So, Brent Rooker would look good.
Yeah.
All I'm going to say.
Just keep calling the A's.
Another one from Morgoth. How much money should I put down on the Mets beating the Phillies? Dumb question, I guess, since the answer is all of it. Yep. Well, if you're following history, right, as many people have noted, every single team to have beaten the Brewers goes to the World Series. Yeah. So Mets are the team of destiny, right, Paul?
That's right. They're going to win it.
All right. Steve Romanesco next up asking, first, less of a question and more of a statement. What really broke my heart was Euchre's call of the end of the game and Yelich in tears after talking about Uke. Second, I'm listening to Paul and Ryan on Larry Miller and enjoying the juxtaposition of Paul's bluntness and Ryan's softer touch with questions and callers. How do you get all connected to be on the show? How did you all get connected to be on the show a few times? And what do you do to prep for it? So first of all, yeah, I'm with you, Paul. I don't know if Uke's in good shape. I kind of wonder what he told everybody one-on-one, but what do you think?
Well, I mean, nobody lives forever, and Bob Uecker has been old my entire life. So
he's 90, yeah.
He's 90, and he sounds rougher. And every season we have with him is a blessing, and we probably won't have too many more, if any more. So it would have been nice to get it done, but such is life. There's a lot of baseball teams, and it's hard to do. As to how we got connected, Ryan should answer that because I just got invited to be on by Ryan, so I have no idea.
Yeah. So about the first one, yeah, the Uke thing really hit hard. You seeing Yelich with tears in his eyes about it, you assume that Euchre's kind of said he's going to be stepping away. I've been really impressed. Euchre still has a strong voice and can still make the calls. It's just it's not as accurate as it used to be and not as whatever, which of course he's 90 years old. I think that it would have benefited everybody. And this is hindsight now because at this point, I don't think it really matters. Uke had a long career of doing color analysis on TV. I think they should have switched him over to doing color a long time ago. And I think it would have been, better, but telling him to, stop doing the play-by-play, which he's done forever. I understand that that's a no-go. And who is going to tell Bob Uecker you need to give that up? I get it, but I think it would have benefited things, and it still would have let us have him as the presence. And he knows how to do the color analyst thing too. There's no question he knows how to do it. So whatever. Yeah, the thing about how we got hooked up with Larry Miller, I got cold emailed by the producer over the summer about it, and fortunately saw it and was like, yeah, we'd love to go on and do that. And apparently they liked us well enough to have us back again the second time. So yeah, I think we can assume that person that asked that question, Paul, probably isn't listening to the podcast tonight. I think we can probably assume they're not listening. So yeah,
I assume they're not. Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty. The sportsmanship question was something. I will put a link to the Larry Miller show so you can listen to that yourself and hear that question because that was definitely something. Something. So okay.
All right, let's wrap up with a few happier questions to leave on a better note. Lucas Stoller asking, is Garrett Mitchell the best DH in Brewers playoff history? Considering the other options, probably. Also, I'll note just in his career as a DH in regular season games, Garrett Mitchell hitting 400, 500, 1,000 with 3 home runs in 15 at-bats. So, yes, he's already one of the great DHs of all time, Paul.
Yeah, I've been trying to run a search to see if anybody's better, and I didn't get done in time. So, but he's been very good. Garrett's been great. For a guy who struck out 40% of his at bats for a long time, he really turned into one of the best offensive players on the team. So kudos to him for that, and he's certainly in the conversation, even if he's not the actual answer.
Yeah. he has been way better. We've talked about this a bunch of times now. He's been way better than we thought he was going to be, and frankly, way better than I think anybody had any right to expect, given the high strikeout rates. Now we need to see a full healthy season from him. That is the job for 2025. Let's see a full healthy season from Garrett Mitchell and see how that goes. So fingers crossed he can pull that off.
Ian Pomplin asking, trying to think happy thoughts. Here's some questions I've had that are not related to a certain playoff series. First, will we ever get a Bob Kozlowski bobblehead? I guess let's take them one by one. Paul, any Bob Kozlowski bobbleheads, singing bobbleheads in our future?
I don't know. And I feel like maybe the guy who asked that question was the same guy who asked me if I care about handshakes. So, no, I have no idea. Not a clue.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even know how to answer that.
Yeah. Who would be the most obscure 2000s Brewer that would be still deserving of getting a jersey with their name on it? I love the random 2000s Brewers jerseys, whether it's the Westover Millers or the George Kataris jerseys. I guess, Ryan, bouncing over to you, like if there's a random 2000s Brewer or just under the radar Brewer, who would you have on that jersey?
Brady Clark. It would be Brady Clark.
Oh, yeah. Good call.
That's
Love
a
Brady
good one.
Clark.
Yeah,
Good
because Brady Clark was a guy who sort of epitomized the Brewers kind of doing a Moneyball thing right after we had read Moneyball in like 2005, 2006. And he got on base and he didn't steal bases, but he didn't get thrown out on the bases. So he was not Scott Podsednik and everybody held it against him. He was also a center fielder who didn't really have the foot speed for center. So a little miscast there. So he shouldn't have been a center fielder, but that wasn't really his fault that he was being asked to do that.
Not at all. He played so deep, like he would be like on the warning track and just let everything go in front of him.
Well,
but he can hit okay.
That's how it would go today, is because that's how everybody plays now. Is everybody plays super deep, but they actually get fast guys in their outfield.
Right.
But he was an on base machine. He got on base a lot, and people just were like, "But his batting average is 260, and he doesn't steal bases. Why is he leading off?" And it's like, because he's got like a 370 on base percentage. It's sort of important. So yeah, him or Chad Muller I've brought up before because he walked up to a Grateful Dead song and he had that one, one of the most unlikely cycles of all time. So yeah.
For the cycle. So do you want to know who the best Brewer DH in the playoffs of all time is?
Yes.
Okay. It is not. It's debatably Garrett Mitchell. But it's also debatably Jake Bauer. they're like kind of tied. Mitchell's got him by just a hair. It depends on what you want to emphasize, OPS wise. But like those are 1 and 2 with well, no, Gorman's got samples. So with any sample size, it's probably Gorman Thomas.
Sure.
But we haven't had that many.
No.
Like Roy Howell had a decent number of at-bats and played pretty well. He might be the real answer.
Was Gorman DHing in the 82 run through the playoffs? Was that where he was?
He at least had a little bit of DHing. And actually, he was garbage if you take out... I've tried to separate it out now. As a DH, he was actually quite bad. He had a 436 OPS. The real answer might be Roy Howell in 1981, who hit 400, 571, 400. In 7 plate appearances in 1981.
There we go.
Yep.
Fun with large sample sizes. Okay. Last question from Ian. What concessions at AmFam should be added or changed next year? Ryan, any hot concession takes?
No. I will give a shout out to the tacos over in the right field over by the beer stand. That was a go-to for us all year, was go over and you could actually get a couple of pretty good tacos for like $10 and enjoy those pregame. So Amy and I took advantage of that a lot. I forget what the name of that taco stand is, but we're not talking about the regular tacos in the place. We're talking about the ones specifically in right field on the second deck.
Yep, I have 3. I'll see if I can remember them all. So the first is they should bring back the pulled pork parfait.
Yes.
Which I don't think has made an appearance in quite some time now, but is a wonderful creation. They should add more hot secret stadium sauce dipping stations. There is one, but they should be more ubiquitous because that makes everything much, much better. And lastly, this is for my brother, at the self-serve beer kiosks, they should not have an option to tip on the bill pay. So all those things they should do.
Okay. Brian Polakowski, last one we'll take this week, asking no question, just 2 statements. 1, playoff baseball is random and stupid. And 2, appreciate everyone involved with the podcast, from the hosts to the fill-in hosts to the minor league extras to the rest of the regular patrons. Thanks for another fun season with yet another heartbreaking finale. Go Brewers. So nice note for Brian to end us on. And yes, playoff baseball, dumb and stupid. As Ryan said, baseball, that's just baseball. So there you go. One of these centuries, maybe we'll be talking about a playoff series win. Get another bite of the apple next year. All right.
Apple.
Yeah, no, they're going to be good. It'll be fine. All right. Before we go, Ryan, new patrons. Who do we have joining up this week?
So welcome to Ethan Krajewski, Chris Bojar, and Mattingly Sideburns upgraded. So thank you for doing that. We always, when people upgrade, we always make sure to mention that. So thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. And yeah, look forward to your questions on the minor league extra, everybody.
Yeah. Again, they're taping this this Thursday of this week. If you're listening to this, still time to get those questions in if you're a patron over at patreon.com/MKE tailgate. And even if you're not a patron, I should mention too, you can support us another way. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this, and give us a 5-star review. You know, if you happen to be a radio producer too, feel free to email us to help us get the word out as well. While you're there, hit the subscribe or follow button on your platform of choice to make sure you don't miss an episode. As we mentioned, taking next week off just to kind of give everyone a break in the podcasting schedule, especially Paul, who's super busy this time of year typically. So obviously still look for that minor league extra. As we mentioned, we're going to be putting out a clip of that in place of the big pod in the next week. You'll still have a reporting as eligible to get all your Packers talk needs. Yep. Until then, I guess we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks in the playoffs, if I can bear to watch any games before we get to the World Series. And we'll cover any Brewers news that might come out of the early postseason for them. Any, front office moves, that kind of thing. Until then, I guess we'll see what happens. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you for joining in on our little 90-minute therapy session for another Brewers postseason loss. We'll talk to you next time here on Milwaukee's Tailgate.
Fair weather fan, it's not what I am, even though the zip code has changed. I might smile and joy when I'm currently employed. Your soul can't be rearranged. It's hard to understand. It's so hard to understand. Fair weather, fair